All right. Today we have Judd with us on the Bulletproof Dental Practice podcast. And I have to say that Craig is not on the podcast right now because today it is Wednesday before the storm is about to hit in South Florida. So I just got off the phone with him and he said, buddy, can you handle this by myself? Because pandemonium is ensuing. I said, I got this. So Brett is with us today. Brett Judd, Judd, and he's called the Practice Therapist. And we were really intrigued by this title and really wanted to get Brett on the show to talk about kind of what ensues from this. And I'm going to give a little bit of a bio for Brett just so everyone gets some context. So Brett is the creator of the Profitable Practice Blueprint and the leader of the Profitable Ethical Practice, the PEP mastermind communities. His mastery and knowledge of relationships and human behavior has transformed the way that practices look at their staff, the patients, and themselves. So Brett is on a personal mission to end burnout and cash flow issues faced by private practice professionals. And in this context, we're going to talk about some dentistry. So he's a sought-after trainer, coach, consultant, and directly impacts the culture, mindset, and functionality and practice of a practice. So Brett, thanks for being on the show.
My pleasure. It's really my pleasure. I love your guys' show. And just thought, man, if I can, I'd love to be on this show because you guys do an amazing job. Well,
thank you. It's a passion. I love a passion. I mean, we love to do it, and but it's one of those things. And I was mentioning to you about your microphone, and you were saying that you did a lot of it, a lot of stuff too. So the work involved with kind of delivering value to folks.
Absolutely.
So it's you can always tell when someone swings over like a $200 microphone. They're like, oh, okay. So anyway, let's unpack things a little bit, Brett. And how did I do with that intro? Anything else you want to?
That's good. That's good. And the practice therapist is one of those titles, that gets eyebrows raised or some, flinches almost sometimes. But that actually came to me from a dentist. We were talking about things that I do and the way that I go after it and my history. And they're like, oh, so you're really my practice therapist. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. And so, historically, I come into my work as a social worker. I have a master's of social work. I've been doing clinical work for many, many years. I started working in the field of social work, social change, just the whole systems and teams in '91, and then a lot of individual work through there. And I love it. It's an amazing experience working one-on-one or in groups with that human dynamic. And how I kind of came into the dentist world is maybe odd around the corner way, but a really good friend of ours, David Phelps, who runs the Freedom Founders Mastermind.
Yeah.
We were in a mastermind together as he was getting Freedom Founders launched out. And at that time, my wife and I were just getting started with the Marriage is Worth Millions program that Gina runs, which is an entrepreneurial marriage success program. We had our therapy practice, and I was going to a lot of marketing conferences to learn how to market and build this thing. And started to see that, I called her from Florida and said, Gina, I'm a little worried if we keep going down this path. Everybody I talk to is either having marital problems or are divorced. Several of the presenters are talking about their failed marriages. I'm like, there's a real issue inside of entrepreneurialism with marriages. And we realized that there was an opportunity there. We created the Marriage is Worth Millions and the Fortunes and Families programs, which Gina runs. David asked us, can you please come to my dental mastermind because my dentists are having problems? And we got looking at it, and sure enough, it is a major issue inside the dental industry, this issue of divorce. Being there, engaging the dentists and talking with them, they started asking me about issues of practice relationships. Now, what do I do with the internal chaos going on inside my practice? How do I deal with my front end that won't deal with my back end staff, or my hygiene pool that are just always bickering and on each other? And as a result of that engagement, I realized that the skills and the expertise of relationships and human dynamics had a place, and a solid place, inside the dental world. That's kind of how I got into this, started researching everything was going on, and found an article that came out of one of those edit moments here.
No, it's all right. There's no edit button. Now, once we hit record, there's no edit.
Yeah, all right, great, thanks. Oral health.
Okay.
Is who did. I'm almost positive. Anyway, I'll just do this. I came across an article that talked about the 4 key areas of burnout and stress that dentists were facing, and the first were staff issues.
Mm-hmm.
Staff issues and the issues going on inside the practice that were beating them down. The next were cash flow issues, which is directly related to staff. If you got underperforming staff, or if you got chaos happening, production goes down.
Yep.
The next was stress in general, and all of that led then to burnout, and a burnout rate of approximately 7 to 10 years, when dentists were just feeling like they were either leaving practice or
the research found. Sorry, I mean to cut you off there, Brett.
No, go ahead.
So the research found that after about 7 to 10 years, that's when burnout started ensuing.
That's when it was really starting to kick in. And one of the dentists, a really good friend of mine, says, he's seeing it in some of his friends at 5. And a lot of it was just all of it compounding. The stresses of practice, the stresses of keeping patients going, the stress of the cash flow, and not having good skills, not having excellent ideas on how to manage that. So that is where this whole practice therapist and the profitable practice blueprint came from, is a need to show really phenomenal people how to deal with the human dynamics that were causing so much stress that it was leading to the burnout in life.
So I want to come right back to this, because I think we're going to be on an awesome path, especially for, like I was alluding to, a lot of our dentists are younger. And so I think it'll be good to kind of tell them, hey, these are the things that you might be able to anticipate.
Yeah.
But I want to talk to you a little bit about, you had mentioned that the divorce rate was pretty systemic in dentists as a whole. And
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? And maybe the two are intertwined with what you just said.
They do.
Okay.
Yeah, they do intertwine deeply. So what we began to find was that a couple of different reports, one of them showed divorce rate in dentistry running about 46%, which was pretty significant. Mm-hmm. And in the dentists that we've interacted with and had the pleasure to chat with, it's running pretty close to that.
But is that higher than like a national average of like, the entire population subset? It
is actually. Divorce is going down. And so the old standard 50% is actually on a decline.
Okay.
And so when you start looking industry specific, dentists as a whole have a very high rate of divorce. And a lot of it comes back to the excessive demands, the stress, the chaos of managing that practice, and the emotional chaos that goes on inside the practice as well. And there's a lot of emotional distress that is happening for many, many dentists. And being able to manage and understand and control that so that it doesn't come home is a really important piece of survival, not only in practice, but in the home.
So one transcends into the other. I guess you're having a bad day and you come home and you kick the dog, and then therefore,
absolutely.
And
it goes. It's kind of
probably was not the best metaphor in terms of what I think of kicking the dog.
No, you come home, you grab a beer, and you watch a ball game, and you don't reconnect with your spouse or your kids,
right? Because you're wiped out.
So exhausted emotionally from dealing with everything. Your high stress, high fear clients or patients, and then your staff who are constantly in need, and then you come home and you're just like, I'm done. And this family who desperately wants to reconnect with you, and there's nothing left. And so that tears that piece apart as well. And then there's a really amazing study that John Gottman did out of when he was doing some work with the University of Colorado, and he looked at the reciprocation of that. So when our core relationships are strong, we're actually better entrepreneurs. We're better at our craft. We have more creativity, more resilience, and ability to deal with stress. When our relationships, our core emotional, romantic relationships are in distress, those key skills that we need to be at the top of our game in business actually diminish. So there's a reciprocity happening here as well. They feed into each other.
I see. It's what you're saying is kind of resonating a lot with me, because before we really hit record, I was telling you how I almost experienced burnout, and it was a whole lot of things going on personally and the business. And you're right, the demands of a dentist are just I don't think people understand it, because a lot of like my buddies, or even my wife sometimes is like, what do you mean you see patients? And I'm like, that's really like a very small percentage of what I do during the day.
That's right.
And people just say, oh, you work on teeth, like what, how hard could that be? People outside dentistry, and I'm like, wow, it's so what you're saying is it's comforting, because I feel like I'm not alone, because sometimes you get on dentistry gets to be this very lonely place sometimes. Yeah. Right? As you think like, man, I'm the only one going through this. But here you say that it's kind of these are the problems that everyone has. I mean, I kind of know that, but it's reaffirming when you're the coach, kind of getting people through some of that. So yeah. How do you basically take someone out of that place, or what do you do when you meet someone, they say, hey, I'm burnt out, and this is falling apart. Like, can you go through your processes of kind of what you do for someone?
Yeah, absolutely. So these aren't necessarily in order, but they all tend to come together at different times in the process, because everybody's what they need is going to be different, and where we start. But I will give you a couple of really fantastic tips here. So one thing that we immediately start to do is what you just talked about, Peter, and that is normalize. You're not alone. This is very normal. A whole lot of you guys in this profession are doing it. And kind of a dovetail, my core, my background in therapy is almost exact same burnout rate. We're actually hitting 5 to 7 years, and therapists are burning out and leaving for much the same reasons. We sit in a dark room all day long talking to people, and they dump all of their awful stuff to us, and over time it just wears you down. Well, the same thing kind of goes on in the dental practice. You get patients who come in, they're in extreme pain, they're afraid, they don't know what's going to happen, and they have all that emotional energy, and it's going to somebody. And then you have to kind of be the bearer of bad news a lot of times, or inflict more pain and assist them. And what I find is that hour after hour in that tiny operatory, benched over, looking in a mouth with no place to vent it, no place to release it, it just builds up. So the first thing that I start doing when I talk with somebody is we put together basically a self-care plan. And what are you doing to move the energy? How are you getting rid of this? When it comes in and you're stressed, what are you doing? Are you taking a break and walking around the building a couple times, midday, to burn off all that energy that you've been absorbing? Or are you just powering through? We talk, first thing is a self-care plan. And then somewhere in that, I'm going to give them a 4W strategy. And it's real simple, but it helps you normalize. And the first is just, why do I care? When somebody comes in, a staff member comes in, a patient comes in, and you feel yourself getting all worked up, real snarky, why do I care? And get that antagonistic question into your mind, because it's going to stop that arousal. It's going to stop that anxiety that starts building up, because you've now asked the subconscious to analyze itself. And it's a powerful thought stopping. And then the other that goes along with it is a real simple who says. So if you start hearing these rules and it has to and these shoulds, who says? Why is that the way it's supposed to be? and really start getting critical with some of these have-tos. And that is a really, it sounds super simple, but when you start to apply it, when you're talking with a patient and they're starting to get under your skin and you say, why do I care? It stops you from climbing up. And then, whose issue is it? So the other W here is whose issue? Why am I picking up somebody else's chaos? Why am I owning somebody else's problem? I've got my own issues. I don't need to carry yours as well. And then the final is, what can I do about it? So why do I care? Who says? Whose issue is it? And what can I do about it? And it's a really simple formula, but when you begin to apply it, you immediately differentiate yourself emotionally from all the chaos that's going on, and it puts you in a very powerful position.
Yeah.
And those last ones are really important. Whose issue is this? Well, it belongs to this person. I don't need to pick it up. Well, what can I do about it? I can validate them. I can support them. I can reassure them. But I don't have to take ownership of it, and I don't have to do anything. Because so many times what's going on is we're overdoing our job. We're not doing our stuff. We're doing everybody else's stuff, and that's impossible. So that 4W method is a really fantastic way to shut down and bring things into perspective when it starts getting a little out of control.
And that's like a live tactic, meaning like when you're in the hot seat, so to speak, you can actually run through those and be like, all right, let me check myself. Let me become situationally aware of what's going on so that I can be self-aware of making sure it doesn't impact me.
That's right.
Because if I'm understanding you correctly, you're basically saying that, maybe day by day it doesn't seem that terrible, but over time it's a cumulative thing. It builds up, and then and then that burn-up just becomes accelerated. So I hear when you were saying that, it was interesting because I was thinking like it's almost hard. We as professionals care. We're healthcare providers, right? Dentists. We see something, we see a problem, we want to fix it. See a problem, want to fix it. And so I think that it's almost that empathy or that desire to help them can get a little bit dangerous, like you said, because someone walks in and says, I hate the dentist and I hate this and you hurt me. And, all of a sudden, you're getting beat up day in, day out, and you're getting that sensation
that's right.
And then you're taking it, and so it's a cumulative thing. The first couple of years, you can kind of shrug it off, but 15, 20 years in of hearing that same message, the strongest human, strongest man, strongest woman in the world can't shrug that off any longer without some practical methodology like you've got.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Wow.
And that's why I love that, because it is something that's in the moment. When you feel that adrenaline kind of kick up, or that tension, or so different for everybody how they feel it, but we all feel it.
Mm-hmm.
You're just like, God, why do I care? Why did that kick me up? Why do I react to that? And you start asking those whys. And then if the back end of your brain says, well, because of this, I'm like, well, who says? Well, that's a stupid rule. Who says that?
Mm-hmm.
And you just start chipping away at these accumulated beliefs that are now driving that underlying behavior. And then you can go to work, because at that point, you now have that ability to stay in a very rational space and go to work with, well, whose issue is this? Okay, my front end didn't do a very good job prepping this person, so now they're upset. So I should probably go do something and talk to my front end a little bit, and we could, help them deal with the clients better. I'm used to calling folks clients. I know it's patients on the other side of here.
Yeah.
And then that action step, because this is the piece where a lot of times we blow it. What can I do about it? And there is always something that we can personally do, whether it's just coming back and validating the fears, validating stress, whether it's taking immediate action in some way, or maybe it's like, what? I can't do anything, and so I got to just step back. But too many times we don't take that action step, or we take the wrong action, and now we just build stress and over amplify things. Or
in a lot of cases, and I'm guilty of this, it's a knee-jerk reaction.
Right.
Without being rational. Like, you just get so frustrated and fed up and burn out or whatever in your day that you say something that you regret or do something that you regret because you get emotionally hijacked throughout the day.
Absolutely. Emotionally hijacked is a great way to put it.
Yeah. So
Cool.
let's talk about how. So I hear how that kind of helps with the burnout,
Right.
but the burnout is, I hear an emotional component we're talking about, meaning that we're caring too much, or that patient's energy is being flopped up onto us, and that's toxic to a point, right? The buildup is toxic. So also let's talk about kind of like how some other aspects that lead to burnout. And you talked about the cash flow and just kind of the running of the business. Actually, you listed off the 4, but we're kind of jumping around because I want to hear some other things as well.
Okay. So compounding, and like I said, depends on where the practice is and where the dentist is, where we're going to start. But there'll always be some of that personal mindset work because it's present in everything.
Okay.
But then we have to look at systems. And one of the ways that I look at this, and a good friend of mine, he builds policies and procedures and stuff. And he and I were talking about, says, all right, Brett, tell me what you do. I says, you know what? I take what you've done and you help them build this amazing Ferrari. And this is beautiful machine. And I teach them how to nuance it. And he's like, that makes a lot of sense. I said, because you can have the most perfect built machine, but if you don't know how to nuance it and finesse it, you're going to end up in the weeds the first corner you get to. And so we have to understand the human dynamic underneath it. Why do people behave the way they do? How do we get out of the role of management and now into leaders? Because one of the other issues, and when it comes down to the staff issues, is that whenever we're trying to manage, and this is where I picked up with you guys on the first 2 episodes that I listened from you guys, I'm like, holy mackerel, these guys get it. And because you were talking about the power of leadership, and people are not manageable,
right?
Especially the new generation of millennial workers.
They don't want to be managed.
So these are my kids. I'm one of the group that raised these guys, right?
Right.
And we raised this generation to be self-willed, to be very driven and focused, and we didn't teach them, thankfully, I believe.
Right. Why did you let them give out participation trophies?
Well, that wasn't me. That didn't happen in my house. But I did teach mine to be very self-directed and to stand up for themselves, which doesn't fit in a management system, right?
Right.
And too many dentists are trying to run management systems when what their practice really needs is a solid leadership. And so one of the things that I start teaching then is how do we build a true autonomous, self-directed team compared to a well-managed staff.
Right.
Because if you're trying to manage your staff and deal with patients and the practice of dentistry, there's no way you can do it.
Yep.
If you've truly empowered a team, they know their position, they know their role, they know their expertise, they know who they're interconnected with. And I use baseball with this a lot. A pitcher and the catcher are a sub-team, interdependent with each other to help the entire team function. They don't have to have a manager there out on the mound with them. They don't have to have somebody right behind the catcher telling what to throw. They work independent. That's what an autonomous team really does. And a truly fully developed, self-directed team is going to have the ability to run without a manager. And you then come in as the leader. You're the cheerleader, you're the director, you're the mentor, and it frees you up to do an amazing amount of your work without the stress and the chaos of managing. And so that's one of the key pieces is we look at the systems and then we look at the nuance of the system and how do you turn that over to the individual? How do we create what I call individual excellent plans or individual employment plans? Mm-hmm. So we've handed it over to the individual employee who's now in charge of their own expertise development, who's in charge of their daily production numbers, and you empower the person to excel within their space and their scope, and it frees you as the practice owner and as the dentist to really focus on the things that you need to focus on without carrying the burden of things that you shouldn't even have to worry about.
Yeah.
So there's that's a major piece to it.
That you're speaking my language now. It's funny how you talk of the word autonomous you hit on. And it's funny, I get the question a lot. So I probably have, 40 plus employees, 50, well, I probably have 42 plus employees. And people, dentists, they'll see at conferences and such, and they'll talk to me and they'll say, man, I bet all you deal with is HR stuff, and I'll stop and I question, like, what do I say right here? Because I don't want to be like, antagonizing the guy and be like, no, I don't have any. But like, the truth is, like, my team is autonomous. The culture was set from the top. People know that, things that they can and can't do, things are tolerable. And just like you said, I don't micromanage because I don't have time for that, number one. And exactly. People want to be managed. And if Craig it's a shame that he's not on this podcast and he's dealing with the kind of hurricane preparation stuff, because he loves to talk about this. But, he loves to talk about the culture creation and kind of just leading. But he and I both, like you said, on the podcast, the second one we did, that, we really speak about the leadership aspect, because, it does free you up from having to micromanage and check in. We have awesome individuals, and you give them a goal, you give them the parameters of which they can excel, and step back and watch, so that's pretty cool. I love that you just said that, and that's the kind of the framework of your teachings and your coaching. I think that's impressive.
It really, to me, this is probably the most important thing a young dentist could do. Somebody coming out. My brother-in-law graduates next year and will come out, unless he goes on. He's teasing a specialty right now, but he and I have talked a lot. And I honestly believe that if a young dentist just starting out, or somebody who's just now buying into a practice and kind of going off on their own, if they will grab this one piece, it's going to make such an amazing impact. They are not a manager. The last thing that you want to do is be a manager. And the thing that I teach all the time with people is that parts and pieces and details can be managed. You can manage the tool tray that comes out of the autoclave and is handed to you. That's manageable. Scheduling can be managed. Budget can be managed. But humans are not manageable. We never really were. My generation and my parents' generation, we were taught to be compliant. We were taught to go into the industry, and we were on that 40-40-40 plan, 40 hours a week, for 40 years and a $40,000 a year retirement. And it broke because it never was meant to work. And so if coming in, you will build a true leadership-based plan, and this autonomous, giving the authority and the expertise over to these incredible people that you've hired. That one thing will set you up to be absolutely successful across the career.
I think one thing, it's dentistry is not a dictatorship, and I think unfortunately that's been told on how you run a practice somewhere way back when. I don't know who started that, but it's like, you got to run your team. It's like rule by an iron fist, and that doesn't work. It doesn't work. It works in certain instances when obviously you've got a problem, right? You have to go ahead and laser focus and remove that toxicity from your environment, for sure. I get it.
Right.
But as an overarching theme, like, that is not the way to run a bunch of professionals.
No, it's not. Especially if you've hired professionals.
Like you said, the millennials do not want that. That working environment, because it'll make them unhappy and make them look for a new job quicker than you can say. I don't know, but it's not, it's not money that they're seeking per se.
They want purpose. One of the core things is you have to have a true vision and a purpose to what your practice is about, because if all you're doing is chasing a production goal every week and you're pushing out money to them, they're like, you know what, I don't need the money. But I want some kind of purpose. I want something, that moves me. And maybe that's, So in the individual excellent plans, when we build those, we'll look at personal motivators. And maybe for this person over the next 90 days, it's going to a specific conference or personal development. Maybe it's not even dentistry, but they want to go and master something for themselves. Well, that's just going to make them even better in your practice. And it doesn't cost you a lot of money to do some of these things. Maybe it's a little more flexibility in what they're doing or in their time, or a way for them to excel in themselves professionally. There's so many ways. And when you get out of that drive production bonus and you get down to the person, now all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's what will motivate you and boost your morale. Fantastic, we can do that. Mm-hmm. And that individualized push and that individualized purpose is what this next generation is really driven by, as well as the global vision of what is it that we're doing in this practice and what is your purpose and who are you serving. Yep. Now they're going to get on board with you, and it becomes incredibly fun. So,
and like you were saying, that kind of freeing yourself up helps you time to, the visioneering time that you need to draw top talent to you, because everyone wants to be led, not managed, and they want to be a part of something that's bigger than they are. All these things, right? I mean, I get it that it's dentistry, and sometimes I get a little bit like, I know I'm talking about dentistry, but it's at the end of the day, it's pretty cool to be kind of leading a bunch of people down the field and knowing that they've got your back, so to speak, right, because you've got theirs, and you're all kind of on this mission, and your GPS is all set towards the same goal, and everyone's aligned, and there's no weak links, and it's just awesome, right? So
that's so true.
Yeah. It's so I sometimes get a little bit worked up about this stuff, but I dig it. I dig it because this is when it makes it fun. But it hasn't always been fun. I talked about the 2015 burnout I said, and I had to kind of reverse engineer. I don't know what episodes you've heard, but of this podcast, but I had a pretty shitty 2015.
Yeah,
where a lot of stuff was coming apart. I had large embezzlement, over $500,000 embezzlement. I had a failed partnership of 10 years break. I had some family demands, and my son was born premature and always in the hospital. And so and I was having a monster clinical year from going back to the thing, which would be great because it did solve the cash flow problems, but I wasn't in an emotional place where I could do all that physical demand.
Yeah.
Right. So all those things literally just wore me out. And so you have to be very strategic. I guess where I'm going with this is like you're saying the same thing, is you have to be very strategic with your intention throughout the day. No different than, the granular example you gave of dealing with that one patient and having them kind of put all their toxic energy towards you. You can take that at a micro and take it to a macro, right?
That's right.
That's cool. I'm digging this. So tell me some other things that you find are problems in our industry, or maybe some advice that you would give.
Sure. Here's one. It's kind of I don't know. I don't mean it to be condescending in any way, but sometimes what I have learned is that every problem seems to be dealt the exact same way. It's almost like everything is a root canal, and I want this system, and so you're going to come in and I'm going to get the x-ray, and we're going to do a cleaning, I'm going to do a diagnostic, and then we're going straight in. Problems aren't solved that way, and that's great if we're talking about, say, a failed tooth or something of that nature. But when we're looking at the human dynamic, it doesn't work that way. And one of the things that I find repeatedly is they're like, all right, Brett, I want to know the system. I want to know the step-by-step, the same way that you would go in and deal with a cavity or something. And there's not, I shouldn't say there's not. There is.
We all want the cookbook. We want the cookbook, like the step 1, step 2. We're a bunch of engineers, essentially.
That's right. That's right.
Don't talk to me in this fluffy language. Show me step 1, step 2, that's such a typical dentist thing. So you're right.
But really, and let me just pull something over so I can read this, because there is a step 1, step 2, if you will. When we're starting to talk about how do I boost my team? How do I get morale where it ought to be? And how do I decrease the stress in my own life? There is a really simple formula, and I call it constructive coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a play on, that whole constructive criticism. But nobody, I've never enjoyed it. I don't know anybody who likes to be criticized. And so if we look at this idea of constructive coaching, and something that everybody can do instantly, and you can do the same thing for your high fear, your high stress patient, or for a staff member who's maybe not performing or they're having problems with what's going on. And this is a very effective way of developing leadership. And it's one of the things that I teach and help practices get to. So number one is praise. You got to grease the wheel. And I do a lot of mechanic work, and I love working with my hands out in my shop. And sometimes you go to get on a bolt and it's rusted shut and it's been there a long time. And so you spray it with some lube and you just let it sit for a little bit and you let that work in. And if you do that, all of a sudden the nut just kind of frees up. Well, praise is that lube that opens things up. And so one of the ways you do is just real simple praise. The way that you, whatever it is really fantastic, amazing, fabulous, great. Just plug it in. Labeled praise. The way that you handled that client's emotions was amazing. The way that you deal with that stressful child when they got in the chair was just phenomenal. Or I love it when you. And so the more labeled you can get that praise, the more specific they're going to be. And then here's a big piece, and this is the next one, is ask. So whenever you're going to go in, lead with an ask. I love the way that you do this. Can I show you something that's worked really good for me? Can I show you something that I've found over the years? And what happens most of the time is, here, let me show you this. And they're like, what, am I stupid? Did I do it wrong? Am I screwing up? And that's the reaction. So all of a sudden there's the defense kicks up. And if all we do is slide in with, you're doing an amazing job and I like your technique. Can I show you just a trick I've learned? It doesn't take maybe 15 seconds longer, and 15, 20 words is all. But you've all of a sudden like, yeah, I'd love to learn from you. Whoa, what do you want to teach me? That praise followed with an ask immediately opens the door. Mm-hmm. And now your staff is like, oh, teach me. I'd love to learn what you know. And thanks for lubing this a little bit with some praise. I'm glad you noticed, right? And then immediately you go to a teach. Because as a leader, our core job is to coach, to mentor, and to guide. So I want to teach them. You've already hired exceptional people. At least I hope you have. And you're now teaching them your way, your method, and bringing them up to a level of standard that you want. So praise them for what they know, ask if you can help them get better, and then teach them what it is that you want, assuming they already know, and then enable them. So this is a big piece. We have to enable them to go out and do it, and empower them with the ability to go out and do it for themselves. We have to give them the trust. We can't micromanage, and we have to assume that they're going to take it, try it, fail, try some more, and then we just go back, we praise, ask them if we can teach them a little bit, and we teach them, and you just keep doing the process. And it elevates them, and their expertise just skyrockets if you will do this, and then validate them. And validation is just a form of praise. It's just really a simple way of saying, man, you're doing a great job. And that praise is very specific. Validation is more of a, I saw what you're doing and I love it. Yeah. They go hand in hand. But that praise, ask, teach, enable, and validate. If you'll follow that model, your staff, and you can do the same thing with your patients. They come in and, man, I'm so excited that you came in. I know that you're afraid to be here. Can I show you something that might help you a little bit? Mm-hmm. You do the same tips all the way through with every human interaction. Everything's going to escalate. You're just going to elevate every relationship that you have. And so it's a real simple formula. Talking about that, Show me the steps, show me the formula. I'm the engineer. I need to know from X-ray to finish, what do I need to do? That 5-step formula is going to transform the interactions inside the practice and immediately brings down the stress.
I just learned a lot because I'm guilty of wanting to do everything very, very quickly and efficiently. And because of that, probably I've erred on the side of being too harsh. I don't fluff a lot of my statements with my team, and they know this. I said, if you want to talk to me in bullet points, please, because
Sure.
but hearing you say that, it's like, we're always trying to get better, all of us on this earth. And so hearing you say that, I'm like, man, I really need to audit the way that I come at people sometimes, because you're right. It's such a defensive statement sometimes can set you back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back kind of thing. And so if you're coming at them with really kind of a collaborative comment, like, hey, that was awesome, but let me show you, I learned this cool trick, right? And like, you could really get into it. Let me show you how I did it or learned or whatever. And I dig that. I'm going to take that one to the bank to well, not metaphorically speaking. I'm going to put it in my mental. I'm going to put it in my mind.
You will take it to the bank. I guarantee you that. Because I will absolutely guarantee that if your listeners will apply, even if they just did the first, I love it when you, can I show you a trick, teach them, and then enable them. Just those first bam, 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 those 4 bullets. Yeah. That's going to elevate the performance and the production of every person in that office. And, just think about it. If you could get even just a 5% rise in your overall production, what's that going to do to the bottom line of a practice? That's going to be huge.
Massive.
And you're going to get that when you start coming in with just, those 4 bullets. I love it when, can I show you something? Here it is. I love it. Go ahead and try it. Do what you can.
It's so simple, right?
So simple.
And when, in dentists, I think we have a problem with like, man, I want to raise revenues. I'm going to learn this skill or learn this trade or learn this procedure, right? When it's really sometimes the easiest solutions to creating a thriving team and a thriving practice are right under our nose. And it's simple methodology, like you were saying, is to apply. And that's some of the lowest hanging fruit, right? Like
absolutely is. The lowest hanging fruit absolutely is in the skill and the expertise of the people that you already have in your practice. And all you have to do is warm those relationships up a little bit, elevate them, empower them, and they're going to bring it in for you. The production's going to go up. And that praise, you cannot validate and praise too much. And the more grease and lube you put into the machine, the better and more efficient that is going to work. Yeah, I just did a live a couple of days ago inside a group that I have for dentists. And I talked about last weekend, my son and I had to change the water pump on my wife's BMW. And I've been in and out of engines since I was in the 9th grade. But we love these cars. Their performance, we both drive a BMW. They're amazing machines. They look beautiful. They feel good. But when we took that water pump out of the front of the engine and I looked in, and here's this beautifully polished aluminum on the inside where nobody's ever going to see it. And the ports were immaculate and the machining was just smooth. I was like, holy mackerel. This is different than just your standard off the rack Chevy engine that I've been into a lot of times. That's the same way, that's that formula that I just gave you, those quick bullets. That's the machining and the milling that's polishing the inside and not just dressing up the outside with a pretty lobby. We're now polishing and machining the inside of the machine.
Yeah, I dig that. I like that analogy. Yeah. I've experienced that, personally. So I think that, I'm sorry.
That's good.
Look, I got 3 kids and a giant dog and young kids, and it's always like, literally, it's like pandemonium around here. So just
I'm
real
surprised my Great Dane hasn't come and shoved his head in here, because so many times I'll be in the middle of these and he'll hear me talking, and the next thing you know, there's this massive.
People dig that. You know, they like the authenticness of it. But one second.
You're good. You're good.
All right, so I want to wrap it up, because you've given some awesome pearls to our listeners.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm trying to think, like, if anything in closing, but you've really given some very tactical things for to implement. Even like tomorrow, as I go in clinically, I can say, hey, I'm gonna apply just a couple of things that Brett's discussed, and I think it'll make a huge impact immediately. And I think what's cool about it is they're really simple. If someone wanted to know more, like, can they, you know, do you have some YouTube videos? If they want to kind of dive deeper into some of the training and the coaching that you offer, like, where would be a good resource?
So one of the best resources right now, and I'll be running a lot of this onto a YouTube channel, but inside on Facebook, I have a group called High Production Teams, and it's just dentists, and I'm in there every day with a live or with tips and trainings on how to build these high production teams. And then the other way.
What's it called? What's the group called?
High Production Teams.
High Production Teams. Okay, and that's a Facebook group?
Facebook group.
All right.
And that'd be one of the easiest and fastest ways to start getting this content.
Okay.
Or go to yourpracticetherapist.com.
Okay.
And there's some resources on there. There's a couple of free resources that people can download. There is a three-part coaching program that you can get in your email. I do some live video coaching that kind of guides you through some of these concepts to get them going, and that's a perfect place to get started. And if somebody really wants to jump in deep, or they got specific questions, they can always put in for a consultation, and I'll talk to them. We'll do 15-20-minute phone call and just say, what have you got going on, and what do you need, and where do you need to go?
Do you have clients that you do kind of on a recurring basis, or is it usually, I mean, do you have people that you know, since it's a practice therapist, I mean, do you have an ongoing thing? You know, it's like Tiger Woods has a coach. Do you kind of deal with some clients, you know, I wouldn't say in perpetuity, but you know what I mean? I think it's sometimes healthy to keep someone, you know, like you on the team.
Yeah. And there are a couple of ways people work with me. So there's two different programs, the Practice Leadership Formula and High Production Teams. I have as a self-led online program that, you know, dentists can get into. They get the modules, but then there's 8 weeks of live interaction, just like you and I are doing on Zoom, and we'll answer those specific questions. But if they want more, then I can be in there and kind of come on and help coach and be in the practice and work with you to build the culture, to build the systems, to polish the inside of that machine, and to walk with you. And what I tell them is, look, my job is to really be behind you, to elevate you to that leader, but to be your mentor so that you're doing it, and to support you and to take the pressure off. So yeah, there are ways available for, depending on how they want it and depending on where they're at. I have a couple of dentists who they needed some real fast triage. So we went in and we did some fix and got them up where they needed to be. And then some others that just needed the spot stuff. It really depends on where they're at and what
they are. Okay.
Who they are and where they are.
Yeah. Is that a John Maxwell book behind you, The Laws of Leadership?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. The 21 Laws of Leadership.
Irrefutable Laws. That's a good book. That's a good book. So obviously, you know, yeah, a big fan of his as well. So, all right. So I'm going to do something we haven't actually done. When I originally started this podcast, I was usually doing this speed round at the end of the podcast. And for whatever reason, I stopped doing it or forgot. But today, to your benefit, ready for this?
All right.
Speed round questions. All right. What's your favorite book?
Oh man, my absolute favorite book is probably Think and Grow Rich. Now, a lot of people say it. I go back to it all the time. Nice.
As you hear that one, I mean, that's just I always say that's almost like a required reading. There's like 5 books that like should be a required reading for the human race. And like, that's, you know, that's always on high-driven people's list of books. So that's a cool one. All right. So a productivity tool or app or software that you use every day that helps you kind of move the needle.
This little buddy right here, the Self Journal.
Nice.
I love this thing. And it's so simple.
The Self Journal, or are you just saying, like, is there actually a product?
It's
or you
called
just
the Self Journal.
Okay.
And it just every day you get up every morning. It's got a gratitude section, your daily plan, what are your goals that you're working for, and what are the things you have to do. And then at night you come back in. What are my wins? What did I learn? And where am I headed? And it's just, as far as keeping you on task and focused, I love this thing. It absolutely is amazing.
Nice. And where do you see the future of dentistry?
I really think that the future of dentistry is going to be more and more client-centered and more focused on the person, especially as things like, Invisalign, you can get them online. A lot of it is becoming commoditized. And the way that you're going to stay relevant, then the same thing in my past experience as a therapist. Therapy is becoming commoditized onto the internet. And the more one-on-one focused and the more personal you can make it. When I go to somebody and I have some teeth done, I want to know the person, and I want to know that they are there for me and they're not just drilling and filling. I don't want to be a transaction. And I think that is going to keep it solvent. And that's what's going to keep the independent viable against the corporate, because I don't want to go into a machine. I don't want to go into a transactional process. I want somebody who cares about me, who I am, and remembers me from the last time I came in. That, I believe, is the solvency and the future of it.
I agree, and I'm glad to hear that you feel that way. That the relationship-based kind of practice, rather than just a mill or yes, there's corporate power, so to speak, and a lot of dentists are fearful of that right now. There's corporate power, but I say we have such, our ground game can be so much better than the corporate-ness. So not to say definitely don't get lazy and complacent, but I still think we have the advantage in the ground game.
Absolutely,
anyway,
you do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's good. Thanks. Thank you so much, Brett. I enjoyed this. I learned a lot. I'm actually
a lot of fun.
Down as soon as we get off here to make sure I implement, 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, and I will post, some ways that you can. I'll post all what you said, how to connect with you, in the show notes, and we'll make sure that our Bulletproof podcast listeners can connect with you.
It's my pleasure, and anything I can do for you guys, I love your show, and I love what you're doing for your dental colleagues, and that's why I reached out, because it's pretty phenomenal.
Cool. Thanks, buddy. I enjoyed it, and have a great evening.